I told my son I wasn't going to eat inside my own house, and he didn't even flinch. Just take a plate out to the porch, Dad. We need the chairs. So I walked to the hook by the kitchen door, took down the one key that actually mattered in that entire house, and pressed it into his father-in-law's palm instead. 40 people were standing in my dining room. Every single one of them heard me say it. You run this now. That was the moment the whole family found out exactly who had been holding this house together, and exactly who had been pretending to. A quick note before we start. Some names and small details in this story have been adjusted, and a few moments are shaped for the sake of telling it well. If that's not what you came here for, this is a good spot to step away, no hard feelings. But if you've ever built something with your own two hands and watched somebody younger try to walk in and claim it without lifting a finger, stick with me. I read every comment. Tell me where you're listening from tonight. My name is Harold Weller. I am 63 years old, and for 41 years I ran a locksmith shop on Cobble Street in Millbrook, Vermont, the kind of business where people still call you by your first name and trust you with the key to their front door before they trust you with almost anything else in their life. I sold the shop 2 years ago to a younger man named Petey Kowalski, who used to sweep my floors when he was 14, but I kept my workbench in the garage, and I kept the habit of never letting a lock leave my hands unless I understood exactly what it was protecting. My wife Eleanor died 3 years ago this past January. Ovarian cancer, 11 months from diagnosis to the end, and I will not pretend the specifics of that don't still sit in my chest some mornings, like a stone I forgot I was carrying. She built the greenhouse behind our house herself, mostly, hauling bags of potting soils in the bed of my truck while I stood there handing her tools and telling myself that counted as helping. She grew heirloom tomatoes and dahlias the size of dinner plates, and when she passed I kept every one of her seed packets in the same coffee tin on the windowsill, even the ones for flowers that wouldn't survive a Vermont winter. I live alone in that house. I say alone, though that's not quite honest. I live with her handwriting on the tin, and her reading glasses still folded on the nightstand, and the particular silence of a house that used to have two people arguing pleasantly about paint colors in it. My neighbor Nate Hendricks retired from the Millbrook Police Department the same autumn Eleanor got sick, and he started showing up at my back fence with 2 coffees most Sunday mornings, not long after the funeral. He never announced it as a kindness. He just started doing it the way some men do, handing 1 cup through the gap in the fence and saying something like, "Figured you could use the company more than you'd ever ask for it." I never argued with that kind of thing. A man doesn't argue with a friend who shows up quietly and keeps showing up. That peace held for about a year and a half. Then, on a Tuesday evening in September, my son Derek knocked on the front door with a duffel bag over one shoulder, and behind him, in the driveway, sat a moving truck with the engine still running, and my daughter-in-law Chelsea already climbing out of the passenger seat, with 2 ring lights wedged under one arm. Dorek is 31. He works in regional sales for a company that manufactures industrial fasteners, a decent job, though he's spent most of his adult life quietly measuring himself against men who make more money doing less honest work, and coming up short in his own head every time. He has my hands and Eleanor's stubborn chin, and for a long time I believed he had her patience too. Chelsea is 29, and she runs an online lifestyle account under the name Chelsea Doyle Weller, 40-some thousand followers, mostly built on staged mornings and captioned dinners. She had her camera equipment unpacked and set up on the guest bed before either of them had found the box with the bath towels in it. Dad. Derek's voice cracked slightly on the word the way it used to when he was 12 and had broken something he needed to confess before I found it myself. Our landlord's raising the rent again in Bar. We can't make it work and still save for a place of our own. We just need a few months. That's it, I promise you. I stood in that doorway with 35 years of reading teenagers' faces behind me. No, that's not right. That was somebody else's story I heard once. I stood there with 41 years of reading customers' faces behind me, watching which ones would bring the deposit on Friday like they said, and which ones would need 3 more calls. Everything in me that had learned to read people that way was telling me this wasn't going to be a few months. But he was my son, and Eleanor's chin was set the exact same stubborn way hers used to get, and something in my chest just came apart at the seams looking at him. "A few months?" I said. "That's all," Derek said. "I promise, Dad." Chelsea flashed a bright, practiced smile from the driveway. "We're going to be so respectful of your space, Harold. You won't even know we're here. I have fixed enough deadbolts in my life to know that when somebody promises you in advance they'll be respectful, it's usually because some part of them already knows they won't be. The first 2 months were fine. Derek split wood for the stove without being asked. Chelsea cooked dinner 3 times, though she photographed each plate from 4 angles before anyone was permitted to touch a fork. I told myself Eleanor and I had been loud and inconvenient once, too, back when we were young and broke, and I let it go. By month 4, Chelsea was sleeping until 11 most mornings and drifting into my kitchen already annoyed that the internet was too slow for whatever she was uploading. She used my coffee, my hot water, my quiet, and it never once seemed to cross her mind that any of it belonged to somebody who might want to thank you. By month 6, small things started disappearing from where I'd left them. Eleanor's rocking chair got moved out of the front room and into the garage to open up the space for content. My truck got nudged out of its usual spot in the driveway most mornings because Derek's new lease vehicle needed the shade. The guest bathroom, which had been Eleanor's during her last year because she couldn't manage the stairs anymore, became, without anyone asking me, Chelsea's studio bathroom, full of ring lights and a backdrop stand where her mother's old bath mat used to be. Nate caught me out at the fence line one Sunday, watching the house the way you'd watch a building you weren't sure was still yours. "How long they staying?" he asked. "A few months," I said. "That's what we agreed." Nate took a long pull of his coffee and said, "Uh-huh," in the exact tone of a man who has arrested enough people who lied to him for a living to know the shape of a lie by now. I didn't answer him, because somewhere under the part of me that still wanted to believe in my own son, I was starting to think Nate might be right. 9 months in, on a gray morning in early June, I found a printed statement from my retirement account sitting folded on the kitchen counter, and my hands were shaking so badly by the time I got it flat on the table that I had to press my palms down just to read the number twice. I had given Derek limited access to one account 18 months earlier for small household emergencies, a car repair, a copay, nothing that should have ever added up to real money. What I was looking at was a single withdrawal that had cleared 6 weeks earlier for $11,400. I sat at that table until the light through Eleanor's kitchen curtains moved a full hour across the floor. I was not crying. I was too stunned for that yet. I was doing the particular dry, hollow arithmetic of a man realizing someone he loves looked him in the face for 6 weeks straight and said nothing. 3 days later, the answer pulled into my driveway on 4 brand new tires. I was in the garage sorting hardware when I heard the engine. Deep, expensive, entirely wrong for our street. I stepped out and there it was. A black Cadillac Escalade, so freshly detailed it threw the morning light back like a challenge. Derek got out of the driver's seat with his chest up, in a way I hadn't seen since he made varsity in high school. Chelsea burst through the front door so fast, she nearly went down on the porch steps, already filming. "Oh my God, Derek, it's even better in person." "Derek," I said, walking over, pulling off my gloves one finger at a time. "That's an $80,000 truck work bonus, Dad." Territory hit its numbers for the first time in 3 years. I earned it. He said it smooth, without blinking, with the kind of rehearsed delivery a man practices in his own head on the drive home, before he ever has to say it out loud to someone who'll know better. 41 years of fitting keys to locks taught me exactly what a rehearsed answer sounds like scraping against the truth underneath it. It doesn't sound anything alike. "Congratulations," I said, and went back inside. That night, I laid the retirement statement next to a financing brochure I found crumpled in the recycling, cross-referenced the dates, and watched them line up with the precision of a full confession. My chest ached in that dull, radiating way that has nothing to do with the heart itself and everything to do with what the heart is carrying. I called Grant Ellery, the next morning. He'd handled my will and Eleanor's estate, and he doesn't do reassurance. He does law, which was exactly what I needed that day. How long have they been living there, Harold? About 10 months. Then you're past the threshold. Vermont requires a minimum 60-day written notice to terminate an at-will tenancy once someone's been in residence that long, even without a lease. No exceptions, and the clock doesn't start until they've signed for it in writing. Draft it, I said, but hold it, I'll tell you when to send it. He asked why I'd wait. I told him the truth. Thanksgiving was 10 weeks out, and I wanted to see exactly how far this would go before I closed the door on it for good. Outside, the Escalade sat gleaming in my driveway under the porch light. Nate was on his side of the fence, with his hands in his coat pockets, looking at it the same way you'd look at something you already knew was hollow. "Does that thing ever actually leave the driveway?" he asked. "Not for long," I said, mostly to myself, and went back inside. The clock had started. I just hadn't told anyone yet. Grant sent the 60-day notice on the second week of September, certified mail with signature confirmation, drafted on his official letterhead, so there could be no argument later about what had or hadn't been said out loud. Derek signed for it himself on a Wednesday morning, which meant the legal deadline for the two of them to vacate fell right around the third week of November. Close enough to Thanksgiving that I knew, even as I told Grant to send it, exactly what kind of season I was setting up for all of us. "It's airtight, Harold," Grant told me on the phone that afternoon. "Documented, delivered, dated. If they're not out by the deadline, we file for unlawful detainer and the court moves fast once the paperwork's clean. No lease means no standing. The house is yours, plain as anything." I thanked him and hung up, and then I did something I'm not particularly proud of, though I'd do it again. I waited to see what my son would do with that letter. He didn't tell Chelsea. Not that week, not the next. I watched him carry that folded notice around inside his jacket pocket like a stone he was hoping might dissolve if he ignored it long enough. And every single day he chose silence over honesty, told me something new about the man my boy had become while I wasn't looking closely enough. By the first week of November, Chelsea had worked herself into a full production over Thanksgiving. She'd been teasing it on her account for 2 weeks straight. Biggest gathering yet. Wait until you see this spread. Her parents flying in from Hartford, along with 2 of her aunts, an uncle, a cousin with 3 kids, and half a dozen of Derek's co-workers she'd decided to invite without asking either of us. 35 people. She'd ordered custom linen napkins with a monogram that wasn't even our family name. She had not, at any point, asked me a single question about any of it. The list showed up on a Monday evening, 4 days out. I was at the kitchen table with the newspaper when Chelsea came in wearing a silk robe, phone in one hand, 2 sheets of cardstock in the other, and dropped the papers on the table in front of me without so much as a hello. "I need all of this handled by tomorrow afternoon," she said, thumbs already moving on her screen. "I've got a blowout at 10 and content to shoot before dinner. You know how it is." She said it the way a person talks to hired help. I picked up the list. 2 22-pound turkeys from a specific butcher 40 minutes south. Imported cheeses. A charcuterie board with ingredients specified by brand name. 4 cases of sparkling water, wine by Vineyard and Vintage. Her own preferred ribbon color for napkin rings, underlined twice. My jaw tightened until I could feel the pressure clear back behind my molars. My chest was pounding with something slower and heavier than anger. It was grief. Grief for the boy sitting silent in the next room while his wife handed his father a shopping list like he was staff at a hotel she'd booked for the weekend. I read it twice, set it flat on the table, and looked up at her. "You planned this party," I said. "You invited these people. You do the shopping." Her thumb stopped moving. For 1 second, something almost like genuine shock crossed her face. Like she'd reached for a light switch that had always worked and found the power cut. "Excuse me? These groceries are for guests you invited, in a house you don't pay rent on," I said, keeping my voice level. "So you can handle the shopping." Her expression cycled through shock, then outrage, then something colder and more calculating that I recognized as a tool she'd used successfully before. "Derek," she called out, not taking her eyes off me. "Derek, get in here." He came to the doorway with the hollow, cornered look of a man who's been pulled into one too many of these and no longer believes any of them end well. "Come on, Dad," he said finally, staring at the floor. "It's Thanksgiving. We're supposed to pitch in. It's just groceries. Just groceries." As if the number on that retirement statement had ever been about groceries. I stood, picked up my coffee, and walked out without another word. Behind me, I heard Chelsea tell him, voice already recovering its confidence, "He'll cave. He always does. Watch, he'll be at that store by morning." I went to my desk instead, called the bank, and deactivated the supplementary card I'd extended to Derek 18 months earlier, the one that had somehow been paying for Chelsea's blowouts and gel manicures far more often than it had ever paid for a household emergency. The list sat untouched on the kitchen table all night. By the time Chelsea tried using it 2 mornings later, every grocery store within an hour of Millbrook had already been picked clean by families who'd planned 3 weeks ahead. That same night, after the house had gone quiet, Derek knocked on my bedroom door. He stood in the hallway with his hands jammed in his pockets, not quite able to look at me. "Dad, I know it's a lot to ask," he said, "but would you mind eating out on the porch when everyone's here Thursday? Chelsea's parents are older, and the dining table's kind of tight with 35 people, and it'd just be easier if you took a plate outside." I looked at my son for a long moment. He studied the baseboard the entire time. I said nothing, went to bed, and made one more phone call the next morning. This one to Nate. Chelsea woke up Wednesday certain she'd already won the argument. I could hear it in her footsteps through the house, bright and purposeful, the sound of a woman who'd decided my objection was nothing more than a stubborn old man's tantrum, and the fix was simple. She'd handle the shopping herself, prove she didn't need my cooperation, and move on. She swept through the kitchen in a cloud of perfume, car keys swinging from 2 fingers, sunglasses already on. "I'll just do it myself," she announced to no one in particular, loud enough for me to hear from the garden. Since apparently asking for basic help is too much around here, she didn't wait for a response. I heard the car pull out of the driveway and felt something in my chest loosen, the particular relief of finally watching the thing you'd been bracing for actually arrive. I know exactly how that trip to the store went, because I've spent 41 years reading people's faces at a counter, and I've heard the whole thing recounted twice since, once from Chelsea's own cousin, and once, with far more satisfaction, from Nate. She loaded 2 carts at the specialty market outside Montpelier without checking a single price tag, the way people do when they've never once been told no by a piece of plastic. At the register, the total came to just under $600. She handed over the card. The terminal beeped once, flat and final. "Try it again," she said. "It's fine." The cashier tried again, same result. "Ma'am, it's declining. Do you have another form of payment?" Her voice dropped to a hiss as she called Derek. "The card isn't working. Fix it. Call your father. Do something." Derek's voice came back thin through the speaker. "Bree, Chelsea, I checked this morning. My account's tapped out, the lease payment cleared, and I don't care. Figure it out." That's when a woman 2 people back in line recognized her from the account, phone already lifting to film. "Oh my gosh, are you Chelsea Doyle Weller? I love your page." Chelsea's face went white. She left most of both carts at the register, paid for 4 bags out of nearly 60 items, and drove home with her jaw so tight Nate said he could see the muscle working from his own porch. As she pulled in, she found me in the garden. Her eyes were red-rimmed, every layer of performance stripped clean off her voice for maybe the first time since she'd moved in. "The card didn't work." "No," I said. "It wouldn't. I deactivated it. It was attached to my account. I'm allowed to do that." "You did that on purpose." "I did," I said. She turned and went upstairs without another word, and a few minutes later I heard her bedroom door close, and beneath it, the muffled, unmistakable sound of someone crying, the kind of tears that come out only once the plan has genuinely failed and there's no camera left rolling. I sat with my coffee and looked out at Eleanor's greenhouse, the last of the season's dahlias hanging heavy on their stems, and thought about the fact that in less than 2 days, 35 people were going to walk through my front door, expecting a feast that no longer existed in any grocery store within 60 miles. Before I tell you what happened on that porch, Drop a comment and tell me you're still here, because the next part is the reason I'm telling this story at all. And remember, a few names and details here have been shaped for the telling, so take it as the spirit of the thing rather than a transcript. Derek left the house at 5 the next morning. I heard the garage door groan open, heard that big engine turn over for the first time in nearly a month, and I lay in the dark listening to him back down the driveway, feeling something that wasn't satisfaction at all. Just a heavy, hollow sadness for the boy who used to fall asleep against my shoulder on long drives, now speeding through the dark, trying to fix a disaster entirely of his own making. He was back by 8:30, empty-handed, his shoulders caved in and a muscle working hard in his jaw. Every store's cleaned out, he said, dropping into a kitchen chair. Costco, the IGA, all of it. I called 4 restaurants. One's got a 6-hour wait, the rest are closed. Chelsea flew into the kitchen with one side of her hair still in a roller. What do you mean there's nothing? People are going to be here in 3 hours. That was when I walked in from the hallway carrying my travel bag, packed the night before. 3 days of clothes, my medication. The small framed photo of Eleanor I take whenever I go somewhere she would have loved. Chelsea's eyes locked onto the bag before they landed on anything else. What is that? Walter, Harold, what is that for? I'm heading up to Nate's cousin's place near Stowe for a couple days, I said. Long overdue. You are not serious right now. Her voice shook. My family is going to be here in 3 hours and there's no food and you cannot just walk out that door. I looked at her steady and even. You planned this. You told me to eat on the porch in my own house, so your parents could have my chair at my own table. I'm giving you the whole house instead. Enjoy it. Derek stepped forward, and this time there was no performance left in his voice at all. Just raw panic. Dad, please, I know we messed up. I know it. But they're going to be here, and I don't know what to do. I need you. I set my hand briefly on my son's shoulder. He flinched like the touch actually hurt. You're a grown man, I said. Figure it out. But I didn't leave the way I would have a year earlier. I walked to the hook by the kitchen door, the one where I keep the heavy brass key that overrides every smart lock I ever installed on that house myself, the one key in the world, mechanical, no code, no app, no battery, that can open every exterior door on the property, whether the system's powered or not. 41 years in the trade, and I never once trusted a house's security to something that could run out of charge. I heard the first cars pulling up outside as I walked back through the living room, and there, coming through the front door ahead of the crowd, was Chelsea's father, Richard Doyle, a broad, steady man in a sport coat, the kind of man who's spent a long career being listened to and has learned to carry himself accordingly. He looked at the moving chaos in the kitchen, looked at my bag by the door, and read the whole situation in about 4 seconds flat, the way honest men usually can if you give them the chance. I walked straight up to him, past my own son, past Chelsea's frozen expression, and I held out the key. You're the head of this family today, Richard, I said, loud enough that every person filing in through that door could hear it clearly. You run it. His hand closed around it slowly. Harold, what exactly is going on here? Ask your daughter, I said. Ask my son. I'll be back Sunday. I walked out to Nate's truck idling at the curb, and I did not look back at the house as it grew smaller as in the side mirror. Not at the greenhouse, not at the porch, not at the son, standing frozen in the doorway with his father-in-law holding the only key that mattered in his hand.